It's like, it's just like life. It's like, especially the writing. Inspiring. I don't think that. This like we should assume that these are like the dead chairs because I was just like confused in the morning. Then I thought you go like shares. She was trying to figure that out for like 30 minutes.
I was like,
And then I was like, I was like the only point. It's just absolutely.
that's what I did too, so.
And that's what Lexi did too. I was like, this was not on the job description. Like,
On the part two, that go. And then Miranda was. Not on the no grid, I was trying to see that.
oh yeah. And it was like, I was just so sad. I was like, well, no, I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
And then I was like, so this people. Cheryl, because I was like, why?
I know, I was like.
Yeah.
No. Oh, that's.
I know. I was like, I felt so smart. I like connect those.
But it was definitely a one.
It was so strong. Like 3 questions. So easy.
I know, I thought it was.
He was like, oh, this will take 7. I was like, no. Your last class ever. Well, that was epic. Are you guys gonna send me?
I know.
So it's like that.
Like I got answer, like how much could I do that?
对不对？
Like probably. Shut up. Oh no.
我们什么都不在电视。
考试的时候看一下。
考试下周三，是下周三，因为怪不医生嘛。
Night.
下一次
哦下周
就是
四
I wanna do right now.
对，周一周二我们去一下山。
Like, you guys can still. No, I'm just gonna do it fast.
然后去哪一场的会员？
Just like we always go Thursday, and then we always 6 a.m. So I'm it's not fun. Yeah, I'm not having fun.
没有。
啊，他有个好，我里边
I just
ordered a bunch like random. You should.
We have a time has his.
是下面的。
No, it's just order section too. Like, no, it's not good anymore because there's no food.
Yeah.
No.
他们说可以，你们说不可以。哦，最近开始。但是他给了我一堆东西。
Like we normally do it.
那不有些让我们 headphones？
没有啊，这会是。我们未来肯定不一定要看到。
Like, you just need to take out my whole bag.
Okay, it's time to start again. It's 2:31, so we need to go when the bell rings. So, in terms of the agenda for today, first of all, you should have all turned in your individual personal assessment score, and the grading for this is it's 5% of your total grade. And then this is one that you get to self-grade, okay? So I need, you did the work, it's a very personal thing to you. So you can evaluate whether you did a great job or you barely put any investment in it, and just send me your grade, okay? Because it was really for you. It's more about you. I can't oh, reasonably put an opinion on what you think things are going to do. So that was for you. And hopefully you will 10 years from now or 5 years from now look back at that and say, does any of this make any sense at all? Okay. I have heard there's a person from the University of Texas that I was at a conference, and he talked about that this is something he did in his class. And I thought it was quite interesting. This is the first time I've done it. But he told the story that people came back to him afterwards and said they were really glad they did that. So I thought, well, okay, I'll see if that works for this group. And so that's what I put it out there. But this is a score. Send me your grade, and I will post the grade up accordingly. Okay. So if you want to do a self-assessment and say, I really didn't try at all, that's up to you. However you want to. I'm not in judgment on that. Okay. All right. So next thing, just in terms of administrative stuff, just remind you they should have sent you a teaching evaluation link for the class, and I do appreciate and I do pay attention and read every comment that students make. Kind of like most teachers, at least most teachers at WashU, I'm constantly in the mode of continuous improvement, and realize that it can always be better. So, in fact, I'm almost obsessive about that. I'm always trying to tweak things a little bit. I need to quit that at some point in time. Anyway, also for those of you, if anybody missed the last class session, I have that final exam test review. So if you want to see that, you can watch the class video from Tuesday. And also look at I have the PowerPoints on there. So you'll be able to kind of see what I was saying was going to be on the test, how it's going to work. That's 8:30 next Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. I think it's in 105, right? 105. Now, to those who can't make it because of the change in time and the class conflicts, there's 5 of you. I sent you an email today, a reminder, just to make sure you and I have the same time, and you'll meet me at the appropriate place. Okay. Any questions before I get into the cases for today? I'm going to go these kind of quick hitters. I'm going to summarize the message. Summarize the case really quickly, and then let's get into the questions. So I spent a fair bit of time trying to condense this down to the essence. But before we get into those, any other comments, anything? Everything okay? Okay, terrific. So we'll get into the cases then. And we've already talked about this. All right, this was one that was left over from last time. And I think there's a message here, and I want to kind of quickly get to it. The General Motors case, it's call it the switch from hell. I'll give you a quick summation of what's going on there. This is Trey DiGiorgio, who was the scapegoat at General Motors, where one rogue employee, you'll see what damage was done by this particular employee and what caused that to happen. I'll inquire from you what you think would make this kind of thing happen. But here's the story very quickly. There was an ignition switch that was approved by Mr. DiGiorgio. I'm going to call it DiGiorgio for simplicity. But he approved that switch. There was a defect discovered the next year, and the defect I can relate to because I've had this happen. Apparently, when you turn the key in the car, it starts it up like it's supposed to. But as you're driving, depending on if you have other keys in your keychain, it could cause that on switch to go to neutral or off or to accessory. So anybody know what happens when that happens while you're driving? Steering kind of locks, your power brakes go kaput. You can't stop, you can't turn. Planes used to be the same way. I don't know if you know this, but planes, if the engine's flamed out, they lost the ability to maneuver the plane. It was like you had one direction, it was down. And nowadays, when the plane engines flame out, a turbine drops, and that turbine allows them to at least steer to somewhere. Okay, but it's kind of the same thing with this car here. The switch would, whether you hit it with your knee or whether the keys would cause it to turn to the accessory as opposed to the on position, that really locked the people up. And also, if it's off, your airbags wouldn't go off. So there was multiple problems with this happening. Now, if you go online, I actually went online this week just to see if there's any update on this. Newer cars, this doesn't work. They've solved this problem. Even back then, they had solved it. But you'll see a lot of guys on Google, they'll test drive it and they'll ask you, hey, what would happen if I just took the key out while I'm driving? And they do all kinds of crazy stuff to test these cars. So that was the defect and a big problem. It was in the ion and the cobalt. In 2005, they rejected a fix because it was going to be too costly at 57 cents per unit. Probably a big mistake there. In 2005, they sent a bulletin out to dealers to advise them to warn customers, don't put extra stuff on your keychain. That had to be a tell, like, okay, something's terribly wrong here. In 2006, DiGiorgio redesigned it and tried to solve the problem. But for the newer cars, but he didn't change the part number, which is basically absolutely against company policy, and also a major regulatory issue. You don't know this, but the NTSB, or the National Highway Traffic Safety Association, they ride. They're all over these car makers all the time. Okay, and it's very serious. And car companies take this very serious because they know these are life and death issues. Okay, any kind of car problem. I have a friend who was a quality executive in the quality in that area, and it was shocking to me how hyper intense it is that these cars are safe. Okay, so it didn't change the part number, which was a major violation of company policy. Also, it kind of starts to smell of criminality that he didn't want to recognize that there was a flaw with the earlier edition. The damage, 124 confirmed deaths, 275 serious injuries, 2.6 million vehicles ultimately had to be recalled, a $900 million penalty. One person, one lapse of, if you want to call it, one lack of ethics, put them in this situation. Okay, so to go a little bit further, GM, fast forward to 2009, GM's going into bankruptcy, and here's a second ethical issue. They're going into bankruptcy, and as part of that, they want to be free of all liabilities regarding faulty ignition switches. So by 2009, if you haven't made your claim, you'll be making your claim against a bankrupt organization after that, and you're not going to get anything. Okay. Now that reminds me a little bit of a situation that I had that I was kind of close to. My brother was flying for an airline. It was US Air at the time. They've gone away. They became part of American, but US Air went bankrupt. And before they went bankrupt, the company took its funds, its resources, and it funded the executive's retirement plan, but gave nothing to the employee's retirement plan. Okay, that has a horrible feel to it. But it's just, there are things that companies can do. Let's go bankrupt and get away from these liabilities. Let's fund the executives, but not there are things you can do that you might say it's legal, but is it ethical? And this is one of the things I want to focus in on. There was a report about this, and the report basically said, the basic problem was there were so many decisions by committees. Committees didn't take action, or they moved too slowly, and it was everybody's job and nobody's job. So some questions for you then. Given that scenario, why would you think GM wouldn't act quickly on suspicions, that the switches were faulty way back in the day. Because, by the way, Cadillac knew about the problem and solved it early on. I didn't post that up here, but Cadillac knew about it and fixed it. But if they had any suspicions, um, why were they not effective to move against it? Even after they knew they had a problem, they were very slow to fix the problem. And there's not a whole lot in the story that that would give you any more to work on than what I just told you. But Howell Run, can you think of why General Motors would just not move quickly if they thought the ignition switches were a problem? And this is a problem of every organization. Every organization has this problem. What did you see in the story that I just put out there? What did you see as the problem? Help me out here. Help me out here. Tubey, what did you see as the problem? Okay, so obviously costs come into play in all these kinds of decisions, right? And so even though it wasn't an expensive fix after it was all said and done, that's a classic example, that there's the famous case of I think it was, I'm trying to remember the name of the car early on when they could have fixed something, but they were actually in their notes to one another. This is way back in the 60s. In their notes to one another, the engineers were talking about how much it would cost to fix versus how much it would cost to pay people, those families that died. Well, it'll cost this X number of people are going to die. We're going to give them 100,000 each versus it's going to cost us $1.25 to fix it. Let's just and that was obviously, nowadays people are at least smart enough. We don't put that in email, but in some ways, they're thinking about it. They're thinking about what does it cost for this fix, and they obviously passed on it at a certain point in time. 57 says they weren't that worried about it, even though there was reason to be worried about it. So certainly cost would be a factor. I think that this report that came out basically said that, solving problems by committee is a bad idea. Let me ask you, Sandra, have you worked in a committee of any kind here while you've been at WashU or outside of WashU?
Yes.
How do you think, what was your experience? Did you feel like committees were effective ways to get work done?
It was for proposals for grants
Okay.
so deciding like the amounts awarded. I think it was effective because there's a lot of different perspectives, but at different
Okay.
resolution.
Okay, so that's an advantage to committee. You get different points of view brought to the table that may need to be heard at some point in time. Sam, what do you think about, you worked in committees at all up to this point?
Yeah, I have. For like the committee I worked with, there was like 2 exec members and then like 12 or so general like body members in that committee. And sometimes I felt that like the exec members like kind of like carry all the weight and they do all the work, and the general members like don't put in as much because there's just not as much of like an incentive. So I've struggled with that.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes maybe this is true in some cases, but I know that in committees that tend to be run a little bit better, there's always marching orders at the end of every committee meeting. Like, okay, here's the to-do for you. We're not just going to walk away and having talked about it, we're going to walk away with everybody gets an assignment. So when we get back together, we're going to move the ball forward, right? So not every committee does that, but that's probably a good habit for most committees. Someone else for committee experience. Gwenny, you had committee experience? Not too much? Okay. Who else in here? Committee work? You, Chen, committee? No, not too much? Okay. Let's see. Catherine, working inside of committee?
Yeah, I've had similar experiences to Sam, just effects, like carrying most of the weight. And then also I think kind of like, especially the execs, but the ones that have the most voice kind of tend to like say what we're gonna do, and then everybody kind of just follows.
Okay, that was in real business, right? Was that in a real business or a university committee?
University.
Okay. I'm surprised a little bit. In real business, in business committees, there tend to be the leader tends to dominate, and the rest of the people kind of contribute to whatever the leader is trying to do. But it's a very strong presence of whoever's in charge of things for the most part. My experience. Now, I have a couple thoughts on that, and here's some things in terms of the ethics of the whole deal. Okay. Talking about committees. This is, if you live in the South, you'd know that committees are where good ideas go to die. Okay, because if you're the new leader and you have these great ideas that you want to implement, especially in university settings. So Maya comes up with a great idea. She says, "Hey, let's do this," and she's the new vice president for something, and she has a great new plan. The reaction of the faculty is always going to be, "Maya, that is a fantastic idea. Let's put that in a committee and let's kind of hash that one out. And we're going to stall. Well, that committee is going to work on it for the next 3 years until you leave." Okay, that's the way they do it. Okay, it's a phenomenon. I've seen more of that in universities than less over the years. Now, the other idea that the GM's problem was the committee is where where responsibility was vaporized. It's like it's everybody's job, but then it's nobody's job, because there was that lack of an assignment of, okay, let's move this ball forward. A lot of talking about it. And if you've ever been overseas, they can talk things to death in committees, and you're kind of like, my God, you've got to quit. We got to do something. We can't just keep talking. And so there's a real problem with that. In this case, the upside was kind of mentioned here. Occasionally, those different voices, like Sandra was mentioning, different voices that can come into play. And that'll keep you from making a mistake, because you need to hear a lot of different, like stakeholders. How your book is big on stakeholders. You need to hear different interest groups, representatives of different interest groups saying what's going on. And it may be that someone, if you're in an organization like Caterpillar, where they start every meeting with, let's talk about the Caterpillar virtues. Okay, we're going to start out with that. And let's keep that in mind as we roll through whatever we got to do. Now, that's pretty impressive in a way. And so it's a way that, inside of the group, there will be sort of buttressing each other up to make sure you maintain those standards. Okay, because by yourself, you might think, where's the shortcut? We can get around this. Let's find a way around this problem. So corporate standards can be upheld in that, and with multiple voices. So it's kind of like when you're in the committee, you might think about that. You might think about, is this moving the organization forward? Is it moving it forward in an ethical manner? Is this something that when it's all said and done, we're going to be very pleased about? As opposed to what happened at General Motors, unfortunately. I'll just kind of go over a couple touches on it. In terms of why they didn't act effectively, well, they either didn't understand the nature of the problem fully. DiGiorgio did, unfortunately, or they didn't have a proper instruction on how to move a problem forward. Now, most modern organizations, modern manufacturers, treat defects in a whole different way these days. A defect is like a brick of gold. They need to understand it. They need to know why. They need to know how that came to be. They need to know where the product was made, when it was made, what machine made it. They have all kinds of things inside the engineering world when they have problems, because they have to understand the problem 100%. So it's a very different world in engineering these days. I can't imagine a scenario today where one person can sign off on something and it snowball into this disaster they had at General Motors. So there's obviously procedural problems at General Motors, policy problems at General Motors that led this thing to continue on. Uh, Given the scenario I just expressed to you, is General Motors at fault for the deaths, or who would be at fault for the deaths? Because this is coming to court. Jennifer, who do you think? Should it be the engineer who signed off on it? Should it be anyone around him that knew about it? Are they going to be at fault for the deaths and injuries? Say again? Yeah, definitely big problem for him. Absolutely big problem. Uh, Anybody else around him you think would be part of the deal? They had to know or knew. And the old legal thing saying is knew or should have known, right? Who else knew or should have known this was a problem? Yeah, Hyun.
It is the problem of design, so the engineer is responsible for it. But after the case was going out and the manager team decided not doing anything, so they began to take the
That's a really interesting insight because once they started hearing of problems, it becomes a different animal, doesn't it? Now it's like, okay, who are the investigators here? And are the investigators trying to protect General Motors, or are they trying to find out the truth of the problem? So you get a whole new layer of people who could be at fault for this ongoing problem. Okay, so that's a good point. So yes, DiGiorgio, certainly anybody that knew or should have known in that process. General Motors writ large in terms of their committee structure, you might want to argue that, or that their whole system really makes General Motors itself accountable. And you could say it in some ways that that's actually the way it falls out because they're the ones paying the 900 million, right? Okay, so we talked about this. And last question I'll ask you on this, and I want to show you some postscript on this. But should a company be able to escape liability by declaring bankruptcy? Fahija, what do you think?
if it's just for the sole purpose to escape liability, it's not.
Yeah.
There were other more significant reasons.
This is a common technique of corporations. Let's say I'm making asbestos, and all of a sudden I see some reports that the government regulators are getting concerned about asbestos, and so I take my company to bankruptcy and I start something else and I move on, and hoping to protect shareholder wealth by getting them out of this company and into another one, right? So this is a common step and part of what lawyers have to work their way through to say you basically are trying to avoid compensating for damage you've done. And so but it makes it very complicated legally because it's otherwise it's a tried and true technique. Whether or not it'll work, I guess that's just a case by case scenario. Should they escape liability? I think everybody in a sense of fairness would say no, that's absolutely wrong. Now, if you want to think, well, if you drive the company into bankruptcy and they never recover from it, do you want 200,000 people to lose their jobs? Is that the way? There's some middle ground here. There's be some middle ground where people can be compensated for the damage done to them, and the company, for the sake of the community and so on, can continue. But that's what the legal system is there to work through. Okay, we talked about this. Would you buy a GM in the future? After reading that case, you might say, I'm not so sure about that. And they make a deal. I don't understand why this isn't even a question we need to worry about. Was the president of the company paid too little for her work? That was up to her. That's the way I look at it. So here's the thing. In terms of the postscript, Mr. DiGiorgio was terminated after all the damage. You might expect that to happen. But I've got a couple perspectives, and I got these off of Reddit. And I thought this really kind of highlights the two perspectives on this whole story. One of them blames DiGiorgio completely. Says, he approved the part. He knew it didn't meet specs. He secretly authorized changing it, then misled coworkers. Completely unethical. This is a one-man problem here. That's one perspective. But the other perspective is worth considering. And that is, it says, how many managers did he have breathing down his neck for other more important issues? They can blame the engineer all they want, but this is an indication of a cultural problem. He was scared to spend time fixing the problem. He should have been in an environment where he would be rewarded for bringing an item like this to everyone's attention. So the idea is that the corporation itself bore some responsibility in this. Let me try to get my things down here a little bit. Okay. So some would say this really speaks to the organizational culture. We talked about that last session. That sometimes managers up above, they don't want to hear about problems. They don't want them to go away. They got you busy, so busy you don't have time to solve the problem yourself. And there's so much pressure put on employees. So who knows? How would you separate truth from fiction here? Kind of difficult from an outsider to figure that one out. But certainly DiGiorgio should have solved the problem, knowing what he knew. There's no question that blame was on his shoulders. But the question is, what else contributed to that? And by the way, Mr. DiGiorgio, I searched to see if he actually was legally culpable for this, and I don't see where he ever went to jail or was sued or anything else, which was kind of surprising to me. I kind of thought there'd be some situation where he paid a bigger price than he got fired after 23 years at General Motors. Probably kept his pension too. So that's a weird one. All right, so let's go over this. But every now and then corporations make what I would call big unethical moves. One is reorganizing to hide the damages that are done. And that is itself, I think to anybody that's not a shareholder, it's despicable. It's unethical, it's ugly, it's brutal. You could argue, but it's capitalism. They're taking advantage of the legal capabilities. They're arguing that they need to preserve the corporations for the betterment of the community and so forth. I think that's a weak argument, but all right, the next two cases, let me give you a quick summary. Oh, before we get there, this is following up on our meeting last time, where we were talking about organizational leadership and so forth. So if I were to ask you to evaluate the quality of an organization's ethical leadership, what would be the things that you would look for? If I said, okay, you're looking to hire onto this new organization, this new company, or this new not-for-profit organization or whatever, Remy, what would be something that you would look for so that you could understand that they're an organization with high ethical standards?
If they speak very politely and respect people. Okay, good. Let's see. I'll call on some people I haven't called on in a while. But in the meantime, Lauren, what would you look for?
Kind of like the overall culture and like top management, kind of like what they teach and preach is like how they act as well. Like they don't just tell employees to like act ethically, but they do. So.
Okay. In a short visit, that's going to be hard to see, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything you would see, like, before you committed to them that you might want to see?
Maybe like how involved management is with like other employees, if they're like around and
Okay.
like work as a team.
Yeah, the interaction between the top or supervisors and subordinates, and are they, respectful, friendly, appreciating one another? Yeah, that'd be a real tip off, I think. It's like how they treat each other, right? I know that, I've always found this to be absolutely mystifying, but I've been in many meetings with bank teams over the years, and it always was just would blow my mind. We would get a committee together to talk about a problem. I'm an outsider, right? So I'm sitting at the table with them, and there'll be 12 people there, and the leader will talk, and a second in command will talk, and everybody else watches. And I'm like, what should I take away from culturally? What would you take away if that was your experience? Okay, you understand what I'm saying? You, Chen, if you were in the meeting, you go to a meeting. Sorry, uh, Hao Chang. All right, that was a trick. I like that trick. That was good. All right, Lee, we'll take you. I'm coming back to you, Lee. If you came in, you went into a meeting and basically only two people talk, and everybody else sort of just listens and nods. I mean, what would you think about the organizational culture, ethical culture?
Maybe only two of them have the ability to talk about the topic, and anyone else may fail to talk about it.
Okay, well, yeah, you're kind of reading back to me what I said to you. But what would your be takeaway if you said the ethical culture of that organization? How would you could you describe it from that, or would you not be able to? Not.
I don't have the ability.
Not enough. Okay. Yeah. How?
Maybe that environment is under high pressure.
Okay. It's certainly that the lower level employees don't feel free.
They don't feel they have the rights to express.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They don't feel like they have the right to express their feelings. Now, does that bespeak something about their the ethicality of their operation? Is that unethical?
People can't say there, but I think they have higher probability.
Yeah. Right, because the people below are more likely to be order takers, right, as opposed to sharing thoughts and then as a team moving this way. It's more there's a boss, and what the boss wants is what takes place. So, and we've seen that. You can see that with Skirshi or Ebers. They were the ones who were the boss, and then that environment that didn't end up well for them, right? Okay, good. Okay. All right. So I'll throw out a few other things that Hao Cheng, I'm gonna come back to you now, and you can throw out what you would look for if you were evaluating applying for a job. They bring you on their campus and they're talking to you, and you wanted to make some sort of assessment of ethical leadership there. What would you think you might see or ask?
Maybe how they make big decisions.
Okay.
Yeah. If they always meeting, they take lots of time at meeting or discussion, maybe it's a little waste of time, I think.
Okay.
The leader can make decisions and maybe a little talk with others.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting point. The efficiency versus, at some point in time, we got to move. Time is always of the essence in business. And so what's the balance that they strike between leaders making decisions and leaders getting input from others? That's a really interesting question. Tone at the top, if you could pick it off on those kinds of questions, how does management run the ship here? And when do they demand just simple obedience, and when do they want input, and how do they get it? What's rewarded? what do they reward is a good question, right? How do they incentivize? That was a big problem at Wells Fargo, right? How they incentivized workers to do what they did. Actually, a problem at Health South as well, because those CFOs were richly paid for not bucking the system. So how people are rewarded could be a very important question. How I think you guys are all sort of talking around this, but how the employees treated. Certainly, I don't know if you think about this as a ethical issue. We're going to get into it in gravity payments here in just a minute, but is how people are paid part of ethics? Is that, in gravity payments, we see, okay, someone's trying to make pay an ethical issue. Does that make any sense to you, Hyun?
Pay the managers constitutes their the share of company, they will want to match the market expectation to make a higher price share.
Okay, let me rephrase my question. If I pay you the least amount possible to get you to work for me,
Oh, yeah.
maybe because you're from another country and I can pay you less than everybody else doing the same job. Is that fair? Is that ethical?
Usually will say it's fair.
You think it's not fair?
Yeah, but the thing is that you pay someone less, and maybe they will know because they talk with the other team.
Sure.
And maybe they will not work hard for you.
Perhaps, and I can fire them if they don't work hard for me. That's an option too, right? So, and if you don't perform, I'll still fire you even though I'm paying you less. But this is kind of a big issue, right? Because companies tend to try to manage what they pay people, and sometimes they're always going to go for, not always, but they try to maintain those cost structures and keep them, relatively speaking, as low as they can go without compromising work effort and all that kind of good stuff, because it's a trade-off between turnover and the cost of turnover or the cost of my salary. So if I pay you too less, you might not stay very long. If I pay you too much, well then that's going to affect shareholder earnings, company earnings, and things like this. So there's this balance. You might argue that pay is not an ethical issue. Then again, in this upcoming case, we're going to see, well, somebody's trying to make it an ethical issue. You could say, I'm just going by market forces. Whatever the market forces are, if I can get you to work for $60,000, that's what I'll get you to work for. If the market says I got to pay you 80 or I don't get anybody, then I'll pay you 80. All right, because I got to go with the realities of the marketplace. So that's an interesting piece. You want to know how employees treated. Sometimes that's in terms of also benefits. Again, it's all part of the pay package. Do I give you health insurance or retirement, paid time off, travel benefits? And nowadays they're cutting back on a lot of these things recently, especially travel. I've heard Wall Street Journal had quite a few things. It used to be that one of the perks of would be that you got to travel on business, right? So I wanted you to go to our Paris division and talk to the people there about production. And you say, well, you'd love that. I'd go see Paris. And you would stay over for a couple extra days and get a little vacation out of it. Very, very common. A lot of that's getting cut back these days, sad to say, but you'd want to know about it. As was raised by Sam, do leaders walk the talk? Do they live what they are communicating? And is it okay for you to challenge or disagree? Or how much voice do you have in the management of the business? Is it simply do what you're tasked, or is it something larger than that? Now, having said that, I don't think it makes any sense for the new person to feel like they need a voice. They need to learn things first. All right, so there's always like your first year, you're basically still learning what's going on, and that's input. I don't necessarily expect a lot of input from a newer person. And let them learn what's going on, and then all of a sudden it makes a difference, right? So let's talk about gravity payments briefly. It's a case where, well, I'll give you the story on it. It's a Gravity payment's still around today. West Coast thing. Beautiful story. Beautiful story. You know, if I say beautiful story, something's wrong, right? What's wrong? Anything? Oh, this is an interesting story. Dan Price, as you saw, hailed as an ethical leader in the marketplace. The one moral CEO in America, says Robert Reich. I don't know if you know who Robert Reich is. He was Secretary of State back in the Clinton days, I think. He didn't own the company by himself, by the way. He had a brother, Lucas, who owned 30%. FYI, that does make a difference in what I'm going to tell you. So you know about the $70,000 pay thing. He cut his own pay. That's all true. That's all true. So do you think that Dan Price's decision to raise the minimum salary represented ethical leadership? Where shall we go here? How about Jacob? Jacob, ethical leadership? You think this is?
I mean, I think so. I mean, he's leading by example. I think it takes a lot of courage, and transparency to be able to do this. Like, I think if I was in this situation, I don't know. That's something that I would necessarily do.
Yeah.
I think that is.
It's very interesting, right? It's like I'm not going to fault the guy for giving it a try. I'm kind of like the critics, like, how is this going to work? You know, but okay, what's not to love about it? Especially if you're one of the employees that was making 40 and now you're making 70, you got to love that. Now, how do you feel? How, Sandra, would you feel if you were making 75 and your pay didn't get changed?
Well, I would be kind of annoyed, theoretically, not thinking about the greater good. But I do think that if he was able to make a minimum salary, like he would then increase it accordingly to
Yeah, they didn't say that though.
Right. I mean, I don't know, it's also similar to like a minimum pay with the government and like other structures, but I do see like, and that's like why people left, like they wouldn't be paid based on their skill and how they get paid.
I mean, I've seen organizations do this where they say, if you make above X, we're not giving you a pay raise this year, but if you make below a certain, you're going to get a pay raise. Yeah, I've seen organizations do things like that, and it's kind of like, that's not going to go down well with some people. And here's the same, it's kind of this, I'm putting you in the same shoes. If you were at 75 and didn't get the raise, you're not going to feel like this was fair to you. You're going to feel like I should have got some of this or something along those lines, right? So this, and Kennedy, how would you feel about people knowing how much you got paid? Is that okay if I broadcast your pay to everybody else in the world?
Are comfortable with that?
Okay. Because this is going to broadcast everybody's pay, right? Because you're all going to be in the same boat. Everybody's going to be making 70 that's a certain kind of employee. Some people are very, very sensitive about that. In fact, one of the first lessons I learned in the corporate world was in terms of executive pay. If anybody got hold of the executive pay listing, it'd be shot on sight. In other words, if you release that to anybody, because it's highly confidential. Right? They don't want you to know, businesses don't want you to know what the executives are getting paid anywhere you go, in terms of the internals of the organization. Now, what gets up on the 10K, that's a different issue. But anything else, it's highly confidential. So, well, let's just take that as it is, maybe ethical. It certainly was consistent with their mission. Their mission was to change the way business is done and putting purpose and people above profit. It all sounds wonderful. It all sounds wonderful. Okay. Problems of, where were the stakeholders on this? You might argue that from the textbook, they like this stakeholder idea. Were all the employees discussed? Was the brother brought in this? Dan's the other shareholder. Was he part of this decision? We don't know, but maybe he should have been looped into this, right? Because he might be upset that at the first going, thinking I'm going to be getting less money out of this business I'm invested in, right? So that's an issue in terms of ethical leadership. He should also not just be doing these things without consideration for the other stakeholders, and maybe even customers, because not all customers will necessarily like this if they think this is going to mean their prices are going up. They might say, "You're doing this, but I see what's coming down the road," because it's kind of like buy your airline ticket now because air fuel costs are going to go up 15%. You see it coming, right? So you want to buy your ticket now today, if you watch the news, because you see this thing coming down the pike, and it's going to necessarily raise your prices. So the customers weren't brought in on the other shareholders weren't brought in. This is a Dan thing, right? This is a Dan thing, taking the ethical bull by the horns and moving forward, right? Okay. Maybe the right way to go, maybe not so inclusive of other ideas. Brother Lucas, by the way, was not actually happy about this. He was suing Dan. This is off the charts because he was suing him, and because he thought that Dan had been overcompensating himself, that $1 million pay was excessive pay. And that because if Dan's the 70% owner, he can vote his pay. And guess what Dan gets? Bupkis, right? It's like he doesn't get and so Lucas was suing his brother, saying, "You can't just pay yourself anything, Dan. You can't take all the money out of the kitty and leave me with nothing." So his brother was suing about this, and this is, some people think, is Dan's way of partly solving the problem with his brother's lawsuit. Well, I'm going to take less pay now. I'm going to do it this way. So that's maybe something to think about. So should he arbitrarily increase the minimum salary? We kind of discussed here a little bit. Maybe put a little more thought into that. Who gets the pay? What do we do with the people making more? Certainly should be considered. And I think we just got through this. I know that the lower paid employees are going to be very excited. They're going to be ecstatic. Will it improve their longevity at the firm? I think most definitely. Right? Most definitely, it's going to help with that level of worker. It's not. They're going to get pushed back from the other workers that are paying more. They're going to feel that they were cheated. Now, people doing with a lot less skill and a lot less experience are going to be making close to what they're making, and they're not going to be happy about that if that's not reconciled. Okay. So I think we've talked about all these things. And you might argue strategically, and this is kind of the opposites. This is what the capitalists would be saying. I say, I don't pay good wages because I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money because I pay good wages. That shareholder wealth includes careful consideration of what people are paid, not just willy-nilly everybody gets 70,000, but the kind of pay for performance sort of structure, a pay to match market the market. And it doesn't mean it can't be above market pay, but to give everybody the same seems maybe not well thought out. Okay. Do you really want everybody to get the same? Kennedy, you want everybody to get the same?
No, also I'm wondering is like if they're all getting a certain amount, wouldn't they just not work harder because they're like guaranteed this amount? I don't understand what he was saying, like people are like more committed to the company, but I feel like you're still getting that money regardless.
Okay. Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah, I think we're kind of moving into the territory of, is it a guaranteed job? We're not going to, it doesn't mean you can't fire them, I suppose, for poor performance. It just means that they are going to get this provided they perform. So that's the way I interpret it. Okay, should have increased everyone's salary, even those, yeah, maybe you could argue maybe it would be smarter if you were more surgical in his application of this good idea. Basically, I think we all think it's a kind of an interesting idea. And will it motivate Gravity employees to work harder for a while, maybe? If you get a big pay boost, Maya, are you going to work harder? Okay.
Like it's a financial incentive, so I'd be.
Okay. All right. I mean, in some ways, I'm thinking, when were you not working hard before? Yeah. Or you're just dogging it, you know? It's like because you were getting 40, do you just lay around the coffee pot or something? I don't know. So I'm wondering what more harder work would look like. I'm kind of curious because most of this is a white collar job. That's payments technology. They're keying in thing, answering questions for customers, setting up card acceptance mechanisms and things like that. So it's a little hard to understand what better is here to me. Okay. We talked about this. Should he consult with his customers, employees? Maybe that would have been a good idea. He didn't. So follow up. This is where it gets weird. Are you ready for this? All our stories have some weird twist to them. It seems like I don't do that consciously. It's just if you dig into it, you find out about it. How about this one? This is really strange. Dan in 2013 was assaulted a manager at a pub, was arrested in charges, but the charges were later dismissed. Okay. His wife says he threw, punched, slapped, body slammed, and waterboarded her while they were married. But she didn't file a police report, but she did do it on a TEDx talk in, I think, at the University of Kentucky. Now, I understand, spousal abuse, but I'd never heard of waterboarding before. That's a weird one. Waterboarding your wife. That was okay. Dan's a little out of control here. In 2022, misdemeanor assault with sexual motivation, reckless driving, et cetera, et cetera. He pleaded not guilty. The court dismissed the charges, some of the charges. And then in April 22, this is the one that really is creepy. Felony rape of a drugged victim and the rape of an unconscious victim. But they dropped that because it was too much of a he said, she said thing. This Dan doesn't look as wonderful as he is on the surface, does he? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, this guy's got a basket full of problems. Okay, and serious problems. So it kind of, it's all of a sudden, if you knew that before his propensities, before he came up with the $70,000 idea, you might interpret that $70,000 idea really differently. Right now, we just talked about like, oh, that's really nice. Why not? Now, all of a sudden, if you know, this guy is dangerous. And what is he trying to accomplish with that $70,000 idea? He's trying to buy friends. He's trying to buy support because he needs support because he's a rotten guy. All of a sudden, it looks like Scrooge. It looks like I'm going to send money to the church because when they put me on trial, I want 12 church people in the jury box, and I want them to know I supported the church so that they hear the case differently. So all of a sudden, it takes on a whole different feel. He resigned Gravity in 2022. He did come back, though, and now he's in there in an advisory role, still paid $70,000, or I think it's $80,000 the minimum now. But he did come back. So, yeah, they welcomed him back. He's there as a regular worker, the return of Dan. And here is an interesting thing. I went on here this week to say, is it still working, right? Is it still working? You might find, if you get a chance, I've got this in the Canvas if you want to look at it. But I thought, by now, this thing should have collapsed if it's going to collapse, right? Because we're talking 10 years later. And this was just posted up recently by Gravity Payments, which is still doing business. And so if you have a minute, it won't take you long to go through it. I'm not gonna hone in on any of this, but this is up on their webpage now. And they have their timeline, 10 years of minimum wage. Basically, they go through the whole story. Lives improved. They doubled down. They raised the pay a little bit to $80,000 the minimum. They also have been paying. They've also gone farther than that. Now they're giving employees a share of the profit. Okay, which is being that they're not employee owned. That's pretty interesting. That's I've seen other companies do that. It's not common. I think it's a great idea. Talk about motivational. You guys work hard and make me money. I'll share some of that with you. To me, there's nothing more motivational than that. they're pushing forward with this. They got 12 weeks of paid leave for new parents. They got HSA, 10 days paid off for every new hire, 2 weeks of vacation, every new hire. A lot of times it's one. Employees helping each other out. The broader impact, they make the point of this. Did they make an impact on the marketplace? No, nobody else is following them. They are still on their own. They're on their own here. But they've been doing well, and their revenue's up 600% in the past 10 years. But and so good to them, good on them. It's I guess they even had to get past Dan at some point. But you can check it out. It's a fascinating story. I would feel a lot better about it if Dan had, if Dan's motivations weren't suspect in the whole thing. But it is what it is. All right, so the last case, I think we'll make this the last case. Lululemon, short story. You ladies, are you all Lululemon people? Okay. No? Okay, my daughters are all in on Lululemon. Yeah. So they're like the stretch pants, right? I don't know. It's gymnastic wear for women. I don't think men do Lululemon, right? I don't think so. They have it now? Okay, for men? Okay. All right. So I don't want to be sexist here. I didn't know that. I don't wear the stretch pants in the gym, so I that's just not my thing. Okay. So founded in 1998 by Chip Wilson, who is worth about $5 billion. So it's not a guy that's short on cash. He apparently is known to make controversial statements. Don't need to go into that, but one comment that he make is the company didn't make plus size clothing because it cost 30% more to manufacture. Those are dangerous things to say for someone at the head of this kind of organization, to say, hey, certain customers, we're not going to provide things to you because you're overweight. He hired a person, Christine Day, in 2008, did a pretty good job, but critics said she was moving away from the Lululemon store, that Lululemon was a lifestyle. Lululemon is kind of a cult of clothing, and that people, all kinds of people could wear it. It made women feel, nice to be working out or what have you. Okay, so they had a problem. And to me, this is a little bit comical, but I don't know. Apparently, they made the pants fit tight, but they had a particular production run where the pants were too thin, too sheer, and unintentionally transparent. Okay, well, that's an awkward thing. Okay, that's definitely an awkward thing if you can see through somebody's clothing and they're working out. So they had to actually do full refunds for all that. Cost them $60 million. And the CEO ended up getting canned. Okay. So Chip Wilson, the chairman of the board and the founder, made this comment, and I want to get the ladies' perspectives on this. He says, quite frankly, some women's bodies don't actually work, just actually work. It's about the rubbing through the thighs, how much pressure is there over a period of time, how much they use it. So he's basically commenting about the fault they had with the production is, well, maybe women that are of a certain size, they're creating the problem on the fabric. So I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be in this territory, should I? Yushin, as a woman, would that comment offend you? Okay, you're offended. All right, strike one for old Chip. You're not liking that particular. You think he's fat shaming people? You think he's kind of saying something negative about women who are above normal weight? Okay, fair enough. I mean, Maya, you okay with this? Or you think it's just silliness?
I also think that comment is wrong. I feel like he's trying to like shift responsibility onto the woman wearing the clothes instead of just admitting the
Okay. What do you think that's going to do for Lululemon business, Lauren? If you're a woman, you read this, do you have maybe a more negative opinion of Lululemon now?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you want to shop around, see if others are making a similar product. You don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, if I were like walking in a mall and I saw two like athletic stores next to each other, I would probably pick the other one.
Okay, and apparently you are not alone in this opinion, this kind of pushback, and the pushback was harsh, and Wilson ended up stepping down as the board of directors, and that's the way the story goes. Okay, so the president, the CEO is out, the chairman is out, and was this then? Do you think the executives at Lululemon demonstrated ethical leadership in this whole thing? I think you all just said you didn't like it. It didn't look like leadership to you in terms of the way they were addressing the production problem. So I think we can take that to the bank. But should a CEO have an ethical responsibility to step down if there's a production or marketing disaster? Okay, Princess, do you think that the CEO, if there's a production problem, should a CEO necessarily have to step down? Is that what we're demanding every time there's a mistake, that they need to offer up their resignation or quit?
I feel like they should take accountability for their action
Okay.
by trying to make the better for like us.
Okay, so if they would have come out, and this is a thing you see, that when problems occur, rather than addressing them, they try to, it's like it's the old rule of holes, right? If you're in a hole, stop digging, and they don't stop digging, right? It's if you're in the hole, quit digging, and fix the problem. Recognize that there's been damage done, undo the damage, and I think if they take that accountability and say, okay, we made a mistake here, we're going to fix it in this way and that way, and we love these people. These are customers of ours. We want them in the Lululemon dream, and we don't ever want you to think otherwise, But they didn't do that. They just kind of kept digging the hole, okay? And that's why I think that created the pressure from the shareholders and the community and the customers. That pressure was too much, and they had to get rid of them. Same thing with the board of directors. Now he's still basically the owner of Lululemon, but he's in the background now. He doesn't have much to do with the day-to-day anymore, not to my understanding. Should the board, last question here, should the board have fired Chip or I don't even know how they would do this. How does the board get rid of the head of the board? That would be a tricky thing, especially if the head of the board basically has most of the stock. So I think he had 27% of the stock. So every board member would have to say, okay, you're out as the head of the board. That's a heavy lift. But is that what they should have done? Should the board members have made Chip whatever his name is, Chip Banks, should they have forced him out for saying the insensitive statements? The last question there. That's the ethical question. Is it their responsibility? If he is undermining relationships with customers, offending customers, should the board remove him from being the chairman of the board? First time I called on you this year. I didn't want you to get out with being called on. So. All right. Okay. Well, it's Tube. What do you think? Out him? If you're on the board, you're going to say, nah, he's.
He shouldn't be.
Now, keep in mind, if he finds someone else that's on his side, it's going to get you off of the board. right? So if he finds someone else of a like mind on the board that says, you were just being loose lips, no big deal, then you're gone, right? This is going to be a battle of survival here. So there's going to be a side that wins and there's going to be a side that loses. So ethically, I think they're going to have to assess the damage and assess how much he's kind of tried to undo the damage. And if they feel like that he hasn't gone far enough, then they should vote to remove him as chair. Explaining to him, which I'm sure he knows, that this is what's good for the business. This is the action we need to take to make your customers happy, to mend relationships. Maybe he won't understand it, but he won't like it. So it's a tough thing. And so this is where the board members have to decide, do they want to be on this train or not? Because the good chance they're going to be kicked off the train if they take up arms against the leader. Right? All right. Well, that's that. Let's close it out with that. We don't have much more time, and otherwise, the Nestle is a short story. Let's move on. So, any questions before we go? You all guys are all set for next week. Everything's good. All right, good. Well, I've enjoyed this semester with you. I appreciate that you've kind of helped me with the rules, and by and large, except for Shuyu, kept your computer down and phones off. I totally appreciate that. Sandra, you're going to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna ask.
Go ahead. Go.
I was just gonna ask about like the test specifically. I know we did like a lot of in terms of like real world issues and cases. Like how should we implement that learning like from that degree, but also like actual terminology?
Okay, a quick recap. There's a certain stuff you should sort of put into your gray matter in terms of utilitarianism, action rule, and deontology, and virtue, ethics, and justice perspective. You just put that in your mind, and that because you'll be questions on that. Some of them in just in a multiple choice format, but also in an open-ended question, like, okay, how would you address this problem from those 5 perspectives? Okay, so that'll help you a lot right there. What I just said will help you a lot. Also, what's the essence of the stakeholder versus the shareholder's perspective? However you get that in your mind, I'm not, if you just have I don't think you need to memorize things per se, but to have a kind of a conceptual understanding of what direction stakeholder focus is, or what's direction the shareholder. Milton Friedman, all we care about is how much money they make the shareholders rich and let them take care of the world's problems, as opposed to the business taking care of the world's problems. Very simple concept, right? And so they kind of dig in a little deeper, or there will be a sort of I call it a short mini case on giving voice to values. I'd go back over the notes on that. Say, okay, if you're confronted with a situation, you don't think this is the right way to go, what do you do? What kind of plan would you plot out to get people in the organization to consider doing something different than the way that they're going to go now? So those are, right there, I've basically just told you, 60% of what the test is about, something along those lines. Yeah, there's another interesting little short case. It's kind of more, is this thing wrong or not? Kind of like Dan Price, was that ethical or not? It's like, well, I guess sort of, you might say that, but then again, maybe not. So recognizing, the ethicality of a certain decision. I'm going to put you in as a junior accountant in the auditing field, and you're going to have a certain situation. I'm going to say the character in the story does something, and I'm going to say, is that ethical or is it not? It could explain, right? Okay, and then the multiple choice is kind of based on the readings, right? So if you do the readings in the text, should be good. I will have a couple multiple choice questions that will ask you to recall things too. Now, it's not multiple choice, it's recall. Trying to think of how I can tell you without telling you. But I'll say this, in addition to the in addition to these philosophical paradigms of how we address ethicality, how do you personally determine whether you've made the right ethical decision? You know, how would you do that? You know, call mom, or just what if we're on the front page of the newspaper, right? You know, those kinds of, what are the tests that you would put it to say, okay, I feel pretty comfortable, I've made the right decision because I can withstand that test. And that I think that's an important thing. Something of that nature, maybe a couple other things like that. So I think you should be in pretty good shape. So again, because we didn't do it in class, or if you want to use the last 3 minutes to go online and do your teaching evaluation, they like that at the administrators, because they do my performance evaluation, and just like we talk about it as far as ethics, and they like to keep a close eye that you're getting the good service, a good product. So that's what we do, and that's the way we kind of manage and measure that. So if you would do that, that'd be great. Other than that, I think we're good. Yeah, Kendi.
Like details from the cases that we did.
I do ask. I know I ask one, maybe two questions that you would recall one of the cases or a couple of the cases. Like, what's the common thread between Wells Fargo, Health South, and whatever the other thing is we did? Is there a common thread there? Or tell me the common threads in all of those cases. Okay, something like that would be a good question. Okay, and so if you were never paying much attention, or you only did question one of the group question, you might want to look at your entire group response on certain questions to make sure that you're comfortable with how those stories seem to reflect the same dangers of unethical behavior. Yeah, Remy? Are we going to do what? We're going to use Lockdown Browser on Canvas. Now, if somebody has a problem, I will have a paper backup.
It's not.
It's not going to be in paper. We're going to do the Lockdown Browser because I have the multiple choice questions. But then there will also be essay questions in the Lockdown Browser in Canvas. So the essay questions there and short answer questions. But if there's a problem, I'll always have paper backup. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay.
Good, no, he's right.